And honestly, everybody can't be an entrepreneur. Like everybody's not good at it, nor does everybody want to do it. But I'm a big fan of you got to have some kind of side hustle, and you got to start thinking about how you set up what you're doing with your assets. What's missing now are teach-ins. It used to be you go back decades, people would have teach-ins. It doesn't happen in the same way anymore, and I think it's two reasons.
I'm appreciating a lot of the work that's coming out of the academy. I'm not one who believes that knowledge is power. So I'm wondering, based on all of the work and the data points and everything, what other elements from the place of movement and struggle need to be added to the research in order to make movement one of the behaviors that we're focused on? Because I think the academy has held it down. I think we know enough from your perspective in order to make movement on policy. Who else needs to be in the game?
Yeah, great question. I'll make 2 points. The first is what I said earlier about assets. We're so focused on deficits and deficit data that we don't focus enough on assets. Oftentimes assets that come from the communities that we're interacting with. Second point I'll make on the policy front, learning how to do policy is now I actually had an interesting route because my postdoc was with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in health policy. I learned policy very well. But I also know that there was only a cohort of 6 of us. We were either at Berkeley, Michigan, or Harvard. A lot of people did not get that access. They did not get that 2 years of doing that work. So part of the issue is that in grad school, we don't learn how to do policy. We learn how to examine deficits and expose gaps, not how to create solutions. So what we have to start doing is transforming our curriculum, and students are asking for this. Right, it's part of the reason why the current generation, they're pushing back against the canon. They're like, I don't even want to be an academic. I want to go do something else. Sometimes they don't even know what that something else is, but it's part of the reason why my trajectory has went like it did. Was in Maryland, was getting ready to get promoted to full. I went to Brookings to be a senior fellow. Now I'm at the American Institutes for Research running the Equity Initiative to be able to give out grants. I understand that my trajectory is different, but I hope that it is one such model to look at that then leads to me being in the room with Dr. Stevenson at the White House, where you get these types of moments, but it's really about the work that leads up to that I have been trained to think about policy in a particular way. I have trained myself that when I write op-eds, I'm not just writing those op-eds for the sake of writing them. I'm writing them with a specific audience in mind, a very limited audience. I'm not writing for everybody. I mean, I hope everybody reads the stuff, but I'm not writing for everybody. I'm writing oftentimes for policy makers, very specific policy makers, even individuals on a specific committee. So right now I'm serving on a White House committee on artificial intelligence and law enforcement. Given some of what I presented at the end, maybe that makes sense, right? I'm also on a home appraisals task force for the state of Maryland to deal with the gap in home appraisals that we know that exist in Black communities, even when you have the same house use the same materials. So I think we have to start training in this space. And I think what's missing now are teach-ins. It used to be you go back decades, people would have teach-ins. It doesn't happen in the same way anymore. And I think it's 2 reasons. Not only is it because of COVID and students are trying to figure out what that looks like coming out of that, but even before COVID, when we shifted to using laptops instead of desktops, like I remember when I took stats, you had to go to a stats lab in the same room, like with everybody, and you interacted with everybody. Now you don't have to do that. You get your laptop and you leave. The lack of interaction, and this is why I was saying earlier at the beginning to students, take every opportunity to meet people. Don't just view your education as only classes. That's not why you're here. You're here to interact with people who can transform how you think about things. So as much as I talk about it, and IU was great for me. Bloomington was the problem. But the one thing I remember is that it would take an hour to get from the airport in Indianapolis to Bloomington. And I took every advantage to take speakers every chance I got. I was like, I just got a full hour with Lawrence Bobo, get the heck with Prudence Carter, with these giants, right? And who come back around. So we have to transform this. And I know this is happening under Dr. Stevenson's leadership here. And I think for a lot of us who have the ability to run programs, we have to start transforming that and getting back to these teaching models to really teach students what it looks like to engage in practitioner work. And final point of this, we also have to buck back against the perspective that we're doing research just for pure research's sake. No, we didn't get into that for this. And don't let people tell you that applied research is watered down or less than. Now you still got to publish, like you got to publish your work. But once you publish your work, then think of another way to get allowed on your CV do an op-ed, do a podcast, talk to people, share with a community group who needs to hear your research.
Malcolm X in '64 in the Ballot and Bullet speech talked about an idea of folks in the Black community one day creating General Motors, one day creating Woolrich. General Motors was the largest company in '64 by $1.5 billion in revenue. That's a little bit like saying Tesla and Amazon.
That's right.
Right? And I find that sometimes in the DEI community, there isn't always the opportunity to engage with brothers and sisters in the business community.
That's right.
So that there can be a more strategic understanding of coordinated policy, of the importance of access to capital. So this community that has 2% of US household wealth after 400 years can progress forward. So what if you could comment a little bit on that idea and what steps could be taken going forward?
Yeah, great question, and very important when we talk about wealth, right? When it comes to the home ownership gap between blacks and whites is bigger today than it was in 1960. White people have 10 times the amount of wealth that black people do when we look at household wealth. And when we look at that, the question becomes, what's going on? A lot of people are like, oh, well, it's their behaviors. No, it's not. It is literally these policies. So what do we do about it is your point. Well, I'll say yesterday, I was with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and we had a panel on this, assembling 4 of the black banks. This is the thing. There are only roughly 20 black banks in the United States. Black-owned banks, roughly 20. We need so many more than that. And part of what you're getting at is people pooling together their resources in a way that we know that, particularly when it comes to private equity, that's how it happens. But long before stuff gets on the stock market, people are investing in things. And part of what we have to do, there's research by Sandra Susan Smith at Harvard, who shows that oftentimes black people, because what we get is fragile, that we hold on to it very tightly. We have to get to a point where we start to share some of these secrets and start to share how we've built this, right? How we've built successful relationships and partnerships, how some people have built their wealth, right? Like some of the black millionaires, you don't really know who they are. Sometimes they want it that way. but part of that is we have to identify them and we have to get them in spaces to share this information and then start talking about how to invest collectively, how people made their money, you know, what's happened. And honestly, everybody can't be an entrepreneur. Like everybody's not good at it, nor does everybody want to do it. But I'm a big fan of, you got to have some kind of side hustle and you got to start thinking about how you set up what you're doing with your assets. And I think part of the last point I'll make on this, I touched on home ownership. Let's talk about student loans. Look, most people, roughly 50% of wealth is built through home ownership originally, the equity in home ownership. If black people don't have it because we're in neighborhoods that are devalued, my colleague at Brookings, Andre Perry, found on average that black homes in predominantly black neighborhoods compared to predominantly white are worth $50,000 less. That's your kid going to college right there, right? So we have to deal with that. When it comes to thinking about education, then that means we're taking on a lot of student loan debt. Final point of advice that I tell students getting ready to go to school and you all talking to other people or talking to you all, go to where they're giving you the money. Like literally try to avoid taking out student loans and doing that. Get your scholarships, get your grants, go to where they're paying for that. But we have to start building capacity together in a way that we did decades ago. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ray.